Three younger Browns veterans with a lot to prove in 2025. I'll tell you who they are next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Cedric Tillman is an offensive vet, a younger offensive vet, I should say, with a lot to prove in 2025. On the defensive side, Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire, come on down. Plus, some jersey drama as the rookie numbers were revealed this week by the Cleveland Browns. I do want to thank you for being on every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. And remember, you will find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with some bonus content on certain days and on the weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcast. And of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And in an episode where I'm diving into younger vets, who are on this team and need to make an impact next season, I'm starting with the guy on offense that I think stands out in my mind and that everybody's going to be watching this upcoming year, and it's Cedric Tillman. His journey or his leap this season starts with the fact, or the necessary leap that the Browns need from him starts with the fact that this wide receiver room right now is obviously it's lacking. It's not very deep. There's not a lot of substance there. It's Jerry Jeudy. It's him. It's Deontay Johnson has kind of this reclamation project trying to revive his career, which has fizzled out because he seems to go places and be a head case. And beyond that, it's a bunch of like undrafted free agents and guys that you're sort of late round picks that you're taking flyers on. And so for Tillman, he's going to be stepping into that number 2 wide receiver role with a lot on his plate in terms of taking that next leap. Now, I think you've seen gradual progress from Cedric Tillman to this point. Year 1, he had just 21 receptions, 224 yards, didn't catch a touchdown pass. This past year, a slight uptick. He had 8 receptions, started 6 games, played in 11. He obviously had the concussion late in the year, but 339 yards, 3 touchdowns, a game-winning touchdown that he caught against the Baltimore Ravens in that epic game, with the spirit of Jim Donovan sort of in the stadium, and he's able to sort of give you this magical moment there, and that felt like the almost like turning the corner for him. And it's unfortunate that he missed those last 6 games of the season because it felt like he was taking those strides. Like, and it was the Browns had talked so much about the development of Cedric Tillman and the fact that they had a lot of faith in him throughout the preseason training camp. They were expecting him to take a big leap. It was why, as they added Jerry Jeudy. So it's not like they didn't address the wide receiver room last year, but they weren't necessarily feeling like they needed to scramble at the position because they felt good about, year 2 of Cedric Tillman, and they had Elijah Moore in the mix there as well. So the group was definitely deeper last year. But part of the reason why now a year later they don't take a wide receiver in the draft, I think centers around the fact that they have a lot of confidence in this guy, and they think he's going to turn into a regular, consistent player in the offense as a number 2 wideout. And so that next leap happens in 2025. He has to be an even better version of himself. I think he's certainly capable of that. Whenever you talk to Cedric Tillman, he's very much a guy who's a keep your head down, come to work, ready to, put in the effort. He wants to be great. He wants to succeed at the NFL level. And I think he has taken some strides towards that here in the early going of his career. But now it's about like the big payoff. So for a team, and I said it yesterday, this team's going to run a lot of 12 personnel. It's going to be a lot of 2 tight ends. I think they signaled that by their lack of addressing the wide receiver position. They're not going to be like doing this air it out, throw it down the field stuff they were doing as much with Deshaun Watson. They're going back to the basics of Kevin Stefanski's offense, and I think that's a smart move. So 12 personnel is going to be sort of a bread and butter set for them. Now, that doesn't mean they won't throw the ball. you're going to, if Joe Flacco, for example, wins the starting job, he likes to air it out. And I think he can have a solid connection with any of these guys, including Cedric Tillman. He's the type of quarterback that will make some of these players that are trying to still sort of blossom or come into their own or find their role become better players because of it. So there's a lot there in terms of the quarterback position, but Cedric Tillman has to put together a very productive and consistent season for the Browns and show that he can be a number 2 wide receiver. And if he does that, I think that, this offense could be better than we're even anticipating. Because I think right now we're all looking at the wide receiver room, and it's a little bit concerning. I trust Jerry Jeudy. I believe he's a number 1 wideout. I do. I think he proved that last year, silenced a lot of his critics that were out there saying he couldn't be a top guy, never had 1,000-yard season, all these different things. He gave you all that. And so I think he's a true number 1. I think Tillman can be potentially that for this team, but he still has some room to go, and we still need to see more from him. And he also has to stay on the field as well as part of that conversation. So if he can do that, I don't see why he can't be a consistent contributor, but they need him next year more than ever. And they're banking on him, again, taking that next step or that leap in 2025, because they haven't necessarily put a lot of resources into the wide receiver position this offseason. And there's another reason too why Tillman has to sort of work out, not even just in 2025, but in general. Andrew Berry's history of drafting wide receivers has not been very good. And we know this about him. It's Anthony Schwartz being taken as a 3rd-round pick and not panning out. It's David Bell as a 3rd-round pick who is on this roster, but he got hurt last year in the Jacksonville game. I don't know that anybody, thinks he's going to be a great talent, but, maybe there's something there they're trying to still hang on to and see if he can figure something out. So they're going to sort of bank on that, it seems. But he, in several years here, hasn't, that was his 3rd year last year. He hasn't been a showing you a lot. And there's the list goes on and on. There's a number of guys that this team has drafted over the years at that position that just have not panned out. One of his best picks was Donovan Peoples-Jones, who became a pretty decent 3rd or 4th wideout for the Browns at times, but he's gone elsewhere. He was traded to Detroit and hasn't really been heard of ever since. So it's not like he turned him into some phenomenal prospect, and he was a 6th-round pick. So that's why we see Andrew Berry often trading for wide receivers, because for whatever reason, this team just hasn't been able to develop them. And so to finally be able to do that, finally draft a guy and turn him into something that is a respectable talent on this offense in a pass catcher that you can rely on and has a prominent role in the offense would be a major feather in the cap of Andrew Berry and this Brown staff, frankly, who I think there's questions about their ability to develop that position specifically. That's been talked about now for several years. So it starts with Berry in his ability, his maybe inability to hit on those picks, but it's also about whether or not the coaching staff is good at developing these guys. And so Tillman would be the first real player to achieve that if he can get there. So for a number of reasons and on a number of fronts, Tillman has a major test of a year in front of him. He has a lot to prove in that way as a younger veteran on this team that is stepping into a bigger role and is going to be counted on for a lot more on this Browns team and in this Browns offense. So it was an easy choice as I was thinking through this topic of younger vets on offense, younger vets on defense that I think have to have bigger years and really contribute to this team for them to have success. Tillman is an easy answer, and one that I think makes it's the most obvious on the offense of a guy that has only been in the league for a couple of years here, but needs to take a leap in a big way in his 3rd season in the NFL. We'll see if he can do it. I'm sure he's actually somebody I'm really excited to watch up close and personal throughout the offseason program, throughout training camp, throughout the preseason, to see what he's kind of bringing to the table and if he can handle a larger workload and being really a number 2 guy in this offense on a regular basis. We'll see if he's up to the challenge. The Browns think he is. And if he is, like I said, maybe this Browns offense, maybe this Browns team is better off or in a better place than we're even anticipating at this point. Let's go to the defensive side coming up next, because I actually have 2 guys, younger veterans, who I think need to have have a lot to prove in 2025. Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire, I'm looking at you. I'll explain why they are the answer to this question on the defensive side of the ball when we coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Say goodbye to sticky notes, scribble plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, whether it's Google, Apple, Outlook, or more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. If I had $1 for every time I forgot about something on my family schedule, I could retire from podcasting. It happens all the time and leads to plenty of frustrations from my wife when I look at her like she has three heads because, well, I forgot about something that we're all supposed to be going to on a random night of the week. And so the Skyline calendar has turned my forgetfulness into punctuality on my part. And man, has it made life a lot better at home. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendar by going to skylight.com/NFL. That's skylight.com, or sorry, go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/NFL. So on the offensive side of the ball, the answer to this question is quite obviously Cedric Tillman. On the defensive side, there's actually a number of places you could go. I thought about bringing up Martin Emerson Jr., right? Because he had a great year in year one, a down year in year two, and I know that people were ready to write him off and thought the Browns maybe should prioritize corner more in this draft, which is why the Travis Hunter or not taking Travis Hunter this was another reason why the not passing on Travis Hunter I think was problematic for a lot of people because they felt okay, well if Isaiah McGuire, if Martin Emerson isn't as good as we thought, then you have somebody who can maybe replace him and it's this great two-way player and all these different things. So I understand the thought process there. But my read on Martin Emerson Jr. is like, listen, yeah, he had a great year, he had a bad year. If what he's going to generally give you, if the is like the average, like the halfway point between those two seasons, that's going to be a pretty good corner for you. And I know for a fact that the Browns feel really highly still about Martin Emerson Jr. and they just think it was an anomaly year, a bad year, and that he's going to bounce back in a big way in 2025. So they're not really worried about that. So I stayed away from that. The area I'm looking at when it comes to guys that I think have a lot to prove that are younger veterans on this team, I'm pointing right at Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright on the defensive line. Guys who potentially are going to be lining up opposite of Myles Garrett in certain situations. We know Jim Schwartz loves to rotate guys up front and do different things with them and move them around. And it's about like waves of defenders, not just like one or two guys coming at you all the time consistently. And so I'm looking straight at these two guys as players that I'm anticipating are going to have to play bigger roles in what the Browns want to do with their pass rush and stopping opposing, wreaking havoc for opposing offenses up front. Like, yes, they drafted Mason Graham. Great. I the reason that pick doesn't bother me or, you know, why it made sense what they did was because, hey, you traded back. You still got a top 5 player in this draft. And you added a guy who can be an absolute force for years to come in the middle of your defense. And the Browns haven't necessarily been great at generating internal pressure in recent years. A lot of it coming from the outsides, the edges. So having Myles Garrett draw all the attention he's going to on one side is going to mean Mason Graham can feast in the middle and really make some plays and be impactful for this team. So I'm looking forward to that. But opposite of Myles Garrett, he still needs like that partner in crime from on the other side that can do some things and cause some problems. And so it's going to be a cast of characters that they made a number of moves this offseason to address the pass rusher position in terms of trying to bolster just in general that group up front. That includes adding somebody like Malik Collins, who was released by San Francisco, who was a guy that generated a lot of pressure on the internally. They obviously signed Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, former first-round pick from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who was a free agent. So they set this thing up to be a truly like a rotation of guys. Obo Okoronkwo is still on this team, but Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright, I think, are going to be some of the first guys up in this rotation. And it kind of it's this changing of the guard, if you will. It's like this passing of the baton where they used to do, hey, let's go get this pass rusher, this veteran pass rusher, and sign him or trade for him or whatever, and pair him opposite of Myles Garrett. They're in the form of a team that's sort of rebuilding. They have pivoted to, let's bank on these young guys and see if we can develop them into something. And I do think there's signs that both those players, McGuire and Alex Wright, have a chance to be something. I don't know if it's going to be like every down pass rushers, but they don't need to be. Jim Schwartz's defense is built around, again, those waves of guys rotating at each position on the defensive line. And so if they can just contribute, make the most and maximize their snaps, but do it in an effective way where they're sort of helping or supporting Myles Garrett, I mean, that's going to go an immensely long way. So, you know, with Isaiah McGuire, he played every game last season, and he came away with 3.5 sacks, pretty, you know, decent numbers. He actually had a nice stretch down the end of the season where he had sacks in 2 of the final 3 games. He had 42 combined tackles. He had 10 tackles for loss, 11 quarterback hits. So he did some decent things in terms of being able to generate more pressure, in terms of being able to sort of up front be something that teams had to account for. There were some promising things there in terms of what he was able to do up front for the Browns. And so, yeah, the 2.5 sacks last year. He had 1 the year before that, only played in 4 games. He played in 16 last year. Alex Wright, on the other hand, he made basically the game-winning play against the Jaguars in week 2, where he sacked Trevor Lawrence late in that game and forced a safety. Like, he made a massive, massive play. And it was something where, you know, he was showing some promise. He looked like he was starting to sort of find some rhythm as just a second-year player. And you felt good about kind of like what was to come from him. And then, unfortunately, he ends up going down with a torn tricep last year, and it cost him literally the rest of the season, as he played just the 4 games and that was it. So in his 3rd year, he was, I think, starting to show some promise. He did have 5 sacks, by the way, in his 2nd season in the NFL in 2023. So I think there's been some steady progress from somebody like Alex Wright, and even from Isaiah McGuire to an extent. You know, Wright maybe has a little bit more to prove as a 3rd-round pick versus McGuire, who's a 4th-round pick. But I do think both those guys are going to be key rotational pieces on this defensive front, at defensive end, opposite of Myles Garrett, and getting contributions from them without sort of that stable pass rush force like Myles Garrett's had in the past on the opposite edge, where it's been sort of like a known commodity. They're going to be counted on to sort of carry some of that burden and take some pressure off of him. So how those 2 guys develop as well, along with Cedric Tillman, I think are some of the more fascinating, you know, under the radar stories for this team throughout the offseason program, throughout training camp, throughout the preseason. You know, who's maybe first up opposite of Myles Garrett is going to be interesting. Is an interesting conversation to sort out, because, as I said, there's a number of guys: Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, McGuire, Wright, Obo Okoronkwo. There's a lot of names there, and you know, none of them are necessarily like names that are flashy or stand out that are going to make you feel a ton of confidence. But if they put on a good show leading up to the season, and you feel like someone's coming along in their development, yeah, like you might feel differently if it's a guy like Wright or McGuire. So I think combined, these are the 3 players: Cedric Tillman on offense, and then Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright, that have a lot to prove in terms of being younger veterans, need to take that next step in their NFL journey, their NFL development, and contribute to this team. Those are the 3 guys that I'm looking at. And I'm telling you, those are going to be names that you're going to want to pay attention to in the coming weeks and months as this team gets ready for the 2025 season. Did the Browns do Shedeur Sanders wrong with his jersey number selection? We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts and can't-miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot like we just saw in Cleveland on Tuesday night from Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers to stick a dagger into the hearts of all of Cleveland, or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I just put together a parlay leading into Game 2 between the Cavaliers and the Indiana Pacers. And unfortunately, this is wild. I missed it by 1 point from Tyrese Halliburton. He hit that dagger three and fell just 1 point shy of guaranteeing me a parlay. But because I came so close, I'm going back for more. It's the easiest way to bet live on the action and have multiple things to cheer for throughout the NBA postseason, whether you're a fan of one of the teams that's playing or not. And if you've got a read on who's seeding up, why not back it up with the same game parlay? That's what I did in my parlay I tried to play on Tuesday, and unfortunately it just didn't cash. Now, if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first bet of $5, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more, including in the NBA playoffs, with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so there was a bit of a conversation that sparked up on Tuesday around the selection of jersey numbers by the Browns rookie players. And obviously, Shedeur Sanders comes to the league with a lot of attention is a good way to put it. We know that he's a star in his own right, even as a 5th-round pick. And there was people ready to order Shedeur Sanders. Some even did order. A colleague of mine at the radio station I work at here in town actually ordered a Shedeur Sanders number 2 jersey weeks in advance, like months in advance. He was the first person in Cleveland to have a Shedeur Sanders jersey. I can guarantee you that. And it's all for naught because Shedeur Sanders is actually going to come out wearing the number 2, or sorry, the number 12. Number 2 is his normal number. He's going to end up wearing number 12. Which makes sense because he does have a history of like working out with Tom Brady, and they have a pretty decent relationship there. There was talk about the Raiders maybe drafting Shedeur Sanders because of his relationship with Tom Brady and his dad Dion's relationship with Tom Brady. And so there was some thought there that it could happen. Ultimately, it doesn't. He goes to the Browns, right? And so he ends up with number 12, which is a pretty solid like consolation prize of a number because if you're trying to emulate the great Tom Brady, the GOAT of the NFL, it's not a bad number to end up with in the grand scheme of things. But there seems to be a little bit of controversy around him getting number 12 instead of number 2. By the way, the player who ended up with number 2 is DeAndre Carter, the return specialist / receiver that the Browns signed during the free agency period or during the start of free agency, who played for the Bears last year. He's basically been a return man his most of his career. That's his biggest skill set that he brings to the table. He hasn't necessarily done as much as a wide receiver in this league. But what's interesting about him getting the number 2 is that he has literally never worn the number 2 throughout his entire career. He has played at this point for 6 different teams. And at no point when he's played for these 6 different teams has he worn the number 2. He's worn 16, 14, 19, won several times, 11 most recently with the Bears. He wore 3 and he wore 82. Those are the numbers that he's had. And so he ends up with number 2. Shedeur ends up with number 12. And from what I understand, Shedeur Sanders' right-hand man, Boogie Knight is his name. I know there's going to be jokes made about that, but that is actually his name. And he posted on his Instagram that there's no way the Cleveland Browns should have gave number 2 to anyone else, especially to a wide receiver who hasn't ever worn number 2 before in his career. But we knew that was coming, so we ain't flinching about it. It was expected. Take it, smile, and make it legendary. Keep going. So I found this interesting. I don't need to dwell on this too long, and I'm not trying to stir the pot here and create a controversy. I promise you that. But I found it interesting because this is generally just like standard operating procedure in the NFL. And if you watch, the Browns put out a video the day that the day 2 picks were all, other than Dylan Gabriel, were in the building, where they were all in an office talking through jersey numbers and like their preference on things. And they mentioned like we save, 1 through 19 for quarterbacks. And then like we'll see how it all sort of falls and how it sorts out. And veterans get first pick. Veterans always tend to get first pick on jersey numbers. It's just the way that it goes. And so I can understand. And by the way, like, I think there was some, I believe in that video, and I didn't go back and watch it, but I believe that there was multiple people interested in the number 2, because I think Quinshon Judkins actually mentions that like he wore 1 in college. I think he wanted 1, but if he can't have 1, I think he said his backup would have been 2. So I think he wanted the number 2, for example. So it's not that, it's not like these things, it's a very fluid situation, but veterans always get first preference. And so the idea that like the Browns should have catered to Shedeur and his jersey number, I think is a little bit silly. I don't know that this is like some massive distraction or that he's like put off by it. I'm sure he understands how it all kind of works, but I thought it was interesting that like somebody in his group that is a close confidant and on his sort of in his inner circle put this out there, because it almost made it seem like there was, they're upset that he didn't get his like this preferential treatment to pick number 2. Andrew Berry said it like on draft night. You got to earn everything, and that goes with that. That's the same for your jersey number. Which, by the way, that's not like he could get his number back. If DeAndre Carter doesn't make the team, now I think they want him to make the team because I think they view him as their return man. But if he weren't to make the team or something, he could get it. Like they tweeted out all the numbers for the rookies, and they made it very clear that it's like temporary or subject to change. So at some point he could still end up with number 2. Right now he's going to be 12, and I think that's okay. But I don't think this has to be some major controversy here. I don't think that I'm guessing Shedeur isn't really that bothered by it. But to insinuate that he should have been, allowed to choose whatever number he wanted just because he's Shedeur Sanders, that's the exact thing that the Browns are sort of trying to push back against, is like this idea that anybody's coming in here as a rookie and getting like the preferential treatment. If he was the first round pick for this team, sure, I could understand it. But they are going to allow him an opportunity to earn everything, earn the starting job. He's going to compete for it. He's going to be in that conversation. He's going to have a chance to walk away with the starting quarterback position if he puts on if he does everything right and produces, in the months ahead. So he's going to have every opportunity to do that. But it's just kind of the par for the course that veterans get to choose their numbers and the rookies are kind of stuck with what they end up with. So I get where they're coming from. Like if a player wants a certain number, they get attached to certain numbers that they've always had their whole career. There's nothing to say he can't get it later. But this feels like a situation that doesn't need to become anything bigger. And I don't envision it being something that like Shedeur is coming in to, cause problems now because he didn't get the number 2. I guess if he wanted to try to buy it off DeAndre Carter, he could. But I don't know that he's going to go that far with it. If anything, maybe it just gives him reason to continue playing with a chip on his shoulder and prove everybody wrong. We'll see. But I wanted to bring it up. I'm not coming back to it. It's sort of a silly topic anyway, but I saw that sort of percolating and I just thought we should hit on it. Anyway, another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. More to come this week as we continue talking about the Cleveland Browns. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and we get you ready for rookie minicamp, which is coming down the pike here Friday and Saturday. Hit that subscribe button, make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.